All right. Welcome back, everyone. I am so delighted to have Sunshine with us, who was very flexible this morning and let me have a little bit of extra time to get myself ready. So, we've already covered that time is a construct and an illusion. And I was grateful that we were able to make it work for ourselves this morning. So, Sunshine, I like to start with asking, what does it feel like to be in your body on this planet at this time?
Oh God, at this exact time. That's an interesting. So I'm just gonna like ask in and think, what
Hmm.
does it feel like to be in my body in this exact moment? I've got this whole set of like chills that are kind of going up the left side of my body right now. Not the right, but just that left side of the body. So there must be something activating there. Um, I feel a little bit tired and lethargic. I drink half calf, so I don't get that
Hmm.
big gigantic boost. And I have taken an air of curiosity over the last like 2 years. So I'm always just there's this constant curiosity that sits and lingers in my body. And so I'm just really curious where the day is going to go, especially because I pull cards every morning. And today's tarot card said it's a 5 of cups, which can indicate a disappointment. So I'm like, hmm.
Mm.
So that like lingering of curiosity exists. I got a
Yeah.
little bit of ache in my left hip too. So that's
Oh
how
my
I feel in my
gosh.
body here today.
Amazing. Beautiful modeling of like knowing what's actually going in your body. How did you develop that sense? This is sort of like off topic, but I'm just curious because that's not
Mm,
something that a lot of people have the ability to do, to touch in with all those
mm.
physical sensations.
I have a very, very beautiful, wonderful, incredible. I adore him and love him so much. Somatic mentor that I've worked with for the last number of years. And so he has, taught and helped me understand, and hundreds and hundreds of other individuals understand that like you have to stop and pause and reflect. Our mind and our body, though connected, often operate very separately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like you have to ask your body when you ask
Yeah.
a question like that, you
Yeah.
have to pause and ask like, how is my body feeling right
Mm-hmm.
now, right? How, like, what does it have to say and share with me? And so yeah, as somebody that is in recovery and has had to like look back and do a lot of shadow work and reflection on
Mm.
why I ended up in an active addiction in the first place. I've had to understand how to process a lot of trauma. And if you aren't familiar with your body and you don't recognize that your body holds that trauma, right? Yeah,
Mm.
you're gonna sit in it, you're gonna linger in it, and you're gonna suffer. And that's not the life I choose to live.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that those right people came in to give you that connection because so many folks are out there working on their trauma from just a mental perspective. And the little animal is going, yeah, you can think about all these nice versions of like why you chose as a soul to come in this, but I'm an animal and I'm just gonna stay freaked out for the rest of all time.
Yeah, mind, body, and spirit, right? And so it's very rare your mind and body are going to work in the same way unless you've addressed the spirit that needs to actually connect them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, you're reminding me. I was talking with a client yesterday. They pinged me in an emergency, and they're sick, and it's all sitting in their lungs, right? And,
Mm.
and I literally said to them, I'm like, hey, I said, we've been talking. I said, have you finally addressed the best friend that you have an issue with? And she's like, no. And I said, I got to be real frank and blunt to you right now. I said, you've literally been talking about concerns with that relationship for 3 months since the end of December with me. And I said, your body right now is screaming at you. It is literally telling you she works for this best friend. She's employed
Ah,
by this. I
wow.
said, your body literally is keeping you sick so that you can't go
Yeah.
into that job because that's not where you're meant to be. I'm like, when are you going to start listening to it? When are
Yeah.
you going to stop betraying your body
Yeah.
just because you don't want to hurt your friend momentarily?
Right, right, right. And this like amazing superpower that our body was designed with to override the mental and actually like go out there and protect us by making us sick or giving us an addiction to keep us from these things that our little mind doesn't realize that spirit, like you said, has the capacity to hold and support.
Mhm.
And the mind doesn't have the capacity, the body doesn't have the capacity, but that spirit is where that capacity comes in. Ah, so beautiful. Thank you for describing it that way.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
So let's dig back into how did you get this amazing wisdom that you're bringing into this moment? You started out in a fairly mystic tradition of Catholicism, although it's not maybe the way it was presented to you in your early years.
Yeah, and I've actually heard for anybody that really has a strong Catholic background that's been challenged by it, I guess the Vatican has recently changed some of its own like theological beliefs, like how
Mm,
it's approached. So go read it, go read it if that's something that you dig. Go dig dig through because it's a like a blessing that they're helping to
mm,
propose that. Yeah, so I was born in born into a Catholic family, raised as a Catholic. I went to 13 years of Catholic schooling.
mm,
Went through the majority of the sacraments that you can kind of growing up, minus the marriage and the rite of passing. The falling. If you're going to cross over to the other side.
mhm,
And it was around the age of when I was 11 years old. I remember that I went to my pastor, our priest, and I said, "Hey, I want to be an altar girl. I want to help serve the church." And he made this comment back to me, and he said, "No." And I said, "But I don't understand." I said, "I went to Girl Scouts in another parish." I said, "They allow." I said, "But
mhm.
since I don't belong to that parish, I can't be there." I said, "Why, why not?" And he said, "My church, my rules." And I was like,
Ooh.
"Oh." And in my head, in my little like 11-year-old head, I start to process, but wait a second, I thought this was God's house. I thought this was his church, his house, right? Like
Mhm,
I was really confused. And so I started in my little rebellious way, started challenging every single religion class that I had from that point forward to the point of when I got into high school, I had one or two actual religion teachers that were really beautiful at allowing me to question and challenge.
mhm,
Um, but I did. I started to question and challenge it constantly. If you happen to be familiar with any type of human design,
mhm,
I'm a I am a hermit. I have like this natural tendency to deeply constantly do reflection, constantly do reflection. And so like I've just ever since I was a child have had this kind of innate energetic that runs through me of this, I say that curiosity.
mhm.
And that addiction took a lot of the curiosity from me, right?
Yes.
Because it prescribed it, like, it puts you onto this, like, I don't know, this blinded path of like
Mhm,
conformity,
mhm,
right? I've got to do
mhm,
things this way type of stuff. And so
mhm,
yeah, I've constantly have had this inner desire to know more.
mhm.
And I'm psychic. And so as crazy as it sounds, I have been a know-it-all, a bossy, I've been called a know-it-all, I've been called bossy, I've been called controlling my entire life.
Mhm.
And I've come to realize it's because I'm just given
You do
information.
have more information, you do
I've
know more, yeah.
and it pisses people
Wow.
off, right?
Yeah.
People don't like it. I've gotten in trouble for reading minds. I didn't know that I was doing it as a kid and stuff like that. It's just, yeah, I do. If I ask a question, I get an
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm a very curious. My grandfather had told this story all the way up until he passed, that he was always so amazed by me as a little kid because I guess at the age of like 2 years old, I walked up to him. I only saw my grandparents a couple of times a year, but so he
Mm.
hadn't seen me in a couple of months. I walked up to him and in full sentence said, "How do you do?"
Aw.
And so he's proceeded to tell these stories about I would ask these like full sentence questions, but why does that thing work that way? Just as like a 2-year old. So
Mhm.
I've just ever since I was young, I've had a an unsatiable curiosity. And now I'll be 100% honest with you. It's probably my greatest strength because I've told this secret to a couple of folks, so you'll tell it to your listeners too. Um, the number one, like most, there's a handful of things I've done in the last couple of years, but the number one thing that's leading me right now is I've replaced all judgment with
Yeah.
curiosity. So in the moment something happens, instead of casting any judgment on it,
Yep.
I just become curious. How is the
Mhm.
universe trying to be of service to me?
Yeah.
How is this supposed to be? How am I supposed to navigate this to allow
Yeah.
it to be in my best interest?
Yeah.
And it's dramatically changed my experience with life.
That is so beautiful. That's one of the things that my therapist, starting a couple years ago, started really encouraging me to do. Like, can you be curious about this? Is there anything that sparks your curiosity? And I've started trying to think of it like I'm reading a book, like my life is a
Hmm.
book, and that thing when you're reading a book and you're like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? Like, how's this gonna work? How's everybody gonna be okay? What's gonna, you're like so excited to keep reading it. And it's almost when you close the book, it's like some grief because that's gone, you know? I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
that's something that we get with life is like we're not gonna close the book. We're never going to get to the end and be like, it's all resolved. We're gonna be in this like, what's next? What's next the whole time. And
Hmm.
in moments it's terrifying and curious. But having that curiosity there is so powerful. That's amazing.
Oh yeah.
So it sounds like you were not totally shut down with all this curiosity and Catholicism, but not necessarily super nurtured. And then it sounds like you had this maybe divine intervention with this metaphysical bookstore. Can you talk a little bit
Oh
about that?
yeah. I still scent is one of our most powerful memory triggers, right? And I still, if you pop some of a particular incense
Uh-huh.
on. It's a Nag Champa, but it's not exactly a Nag Champa. There's a mix in it, and I've only run across it a handful, and it takes me right back to this metaphysics store. I'm a strong clairvoyant. I can literally go and walk in here. Like you
Yeah.
opened up, and it's like a mile from it was a mile. It's a mile from where I currently live. It doesn't
Oh,
exist now, but you'd
wow.
open this door and
Uh-huh.
you'd walk in, and you'd have to go downstairs, and it was in the basement of an office building.
Uh,
And so that in itself was kind of like
that's
weird and kind of
perfect.
spooky and strange. But you'd walk in and all you'd smell the moment you kind of walked through the beaded, drapes
Mm,
was that incense. And it wasn't, it was a big space, but they didn't have a lot of stuff in it. It's a big thing that I like now looking back realize.
uh,
But I was so enamored.
mm,
They had this door with like secret rooms in the back, which is where all the readers were. And they had all these shelves with books and crystals and little knickknacks and stuff. And just being like, something felt right in that space. Like something felt, I mean, now in retrospect, it's a high vibrational space. They probably did a lot of really good cleansing on a regular basis. But it was meant to be in this like this high vibed feel good. But yeah, I mean, it was probably the first time in my life in a long time. I also grew up with a whole bunch of trauma, but it was the first probably time in my life in a very long time that I felt, now that I'm even saying this, about to say this, safe.
mm,
Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah. That's probably even what it was feeling safe.
mhm.
Didn't not feeling like I had to hide my
Yeah,
curiosity of what this was, or had to be something that I wasn't, or to put on a mask. Like, I mean, I didn't choose to go to Catholic school my entire life, so I had to like literally put on a uniform that somebody else dictated me to wear. And
yeah,
so like you can't, and I had a beautiful education. I really did. So I'm not knocking that at all.
mhm,
But yeah, I mean, throughout my first, 0 until 18, until I left my parents' house, I lived based upon how they thought
right.
I should live.
Yeah, it was that, like, my place, my rules, everywhere you went was some external authority telling you who you were and what you were allowed to do.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of being at a Catholic high school and that kind of a upbringing, to walk into a metaphysics store I come from a religious background as well. I went to Baptist school, so a little bit different flavor, but I would have been terrified to walk into that store. I would have been
Mm.
looking for the lightning to strike me. Did you have any of that?
You know, so once again, I say about that human design, I'm a hermit, and the other side of me is a heretic. No, I get off on making people uncomfortable in like that regards. Like when it comes to now being who, you know, who I am and kind of taking the, I probably never would have had, I if like my dad was walking with me,
Sure.
absolutely. But like because I was by myself, I was in my own energetic, it was just me and my own auric field, my own like energy just says like, no, go do it. And it's like in retrospect, I've just have I have no I have a very weird hesitation of, you know, being uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a weird lack of hesitation of like I'm just willing to put
You're
myself
more
in
comfortable being uncomfortable than maybe the average Joe.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And
What a
so
gift.
I agree. And I think that's part that gift is part of that. Like if I were to, you know, I'm a leader in a lot of regards. I would say that's one of the things in my leadership tool belt is I
Mhm.
don't, you know, I'm willing to allow people, go ahead. You can stand behind me. I'll take this blow since we don't know what's going to
Mhm.
happen because
Mhm.
I know that I have the capacity to handle whatever that discomfort is,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know. Yeah, so no, I wasn't. And, you know, secretly there's probably a bit of like, you know, big fu of,
Uh-huh.
you know, I'm going to do this because I need something, you know, I need
Mhm.
something of my own. I need to have something that starts feeling like it's mine. Um, yeah, so no,
Wow.
I wasn't, but I'll also say this too. I do think that there are, though my household was very traumatic and
Mhm.
there's a lot of emotional abuse in the household. Um, as long as you were good at keeping secrets,
Mm.
it was easy to get away with things.
Uh-huh.
And so like this secrecy of never like it was just a even now it's such an acceptable dysfunction
Mhm.
in my family
Yeah, just baked
that
into the
oh yeah, yeah. So I mean between secrets my dad kept, my mom kept, my brother kept, you know, that was just in our household, let alone if you were to go out into extended family.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, it was just like it was such a common, we were taught how to keep secrets. So
Yeah.
as long I knew there was safety, that as long as I kept it a secret, there's never going to be an issue.
And yet you bought this tarot deck and brought it home. Did anybody know about that? Did you keep it that hidden?
Mm-mm. Nope. I'm pretty positive, you know, I mean, I used to burn incense in the house and stuff like that, so they knew that kind of stuff. But I was so, you know, I grew up in a generation where like being a latchkey kid and being kicked out of the house at like 8 a.m. and told not to come back to the like it was very acceptable. Like there was no such thing as a helicopter parent, right? Most parents had no clue what their children were doing. And it's funny, it's like kind of humorous where my partner and I were watching this TV show. If you've seen it, it's called Resident Alien.
Oh,
Um,
I haven't watched it, but I saw the
it's
bit about
it's
it.
hilarious. It's
Okay.
hilarious.
Okay.
But there's a scene in it, and he jokingly says he's like I don't know why these Earth humans don't put their children to work more often. It would increase productivity extensively. And we laughed at this, and I said it's only been the last couple generations where children haven't worked,
Yeah.
right? You know, like it was pretty accept, you know, children grew up on the farm, they helped
Farms.
the
Yeah.
family business and you know, whatever it was, like and so yeah, I don't think it was just a very interesting thing to see. And I don't know that a lot of attention was paid to
Mhm.
most kids,
Mhm.
right? When I was growing up. I'll be 45 this year. So
Nice.
yeah, it's just kind of wild to like step back and think that I even though um it was kind of very taboo, and at some point I became kind of like a joke even in the family. There was a big hilarious joke with my my family that I was practicing witchcraft and stuff like
Ah.
that. Um, no, it was never really looked as being so much of a threat, and I think it's because everybody kind of saw it as a joke, like a playful,
Mm.
like, oh, look at my birth given name is Jen. Oh, look at Jen over there playing with her easy bake oven. Like it was the same as that
Sure.
concept,
Okay. Okay.
So nobody really thought anything of it.
Amazing. And so you got sort of developed this set of knowledge and skills and information. And then where did the marriage come in?
Mm. I didn't end up getting married until I was 30.
Mhm.
So it came in around that time. I was 30. I think maybe it was 2011 that we got married. And yeah, that was tough because throughout my 20s, I still kind of dabbled. I pulled cards out every now and again and still did some spell work. I wasn't living it. It wasn't like
Mhm.
ingrained in part of my life,
Okay.
which it is today. But then when my ex-husband started to like ridicule it.
Mhm.
So when I give you this example of my family like looked at it as like kind of like a joke, so to speak,
Just
of like,
kind of
oh, look at,
silly.
yeah, silly. No, my ex-husband like ridiculed it, like made fun of
Mhm.
it. And even like I would try to talk about it and it just made light of everything to the point that
Mhm.
I really started to shut it all down.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I look back on the marriage and, I believe everything in life happens for a reason.
Mhm.
I do regret marrying him. I don't regret the relationship. This is I clarify a couple. I
Mhm.
don't regret the relationship. I do regret marrying him,
Mhm.
uh, just because it was for all the wrong reasons. All
Mhm.
the wrong reasons. Um, but yeah, I throughout the marriage, I mean, I think it was like a year after we started dating, I was in therapy at that point now. It was hard,
Mhm.
and in retrospect, looking back, I decided to partner with an alcoholic who also suffered from generalized anxiety disorder. So imagine
Mhm.
a highly sensitive person
Yeah.
now sharing a bed with
Yeah.
somebody that suffers from generalized anxiety disorder, hypochondria,
Yeah.
body dysmorphia.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I lost who I was. I completely
Yeah.
did. All the way to the point that at the tail end of that relationship, I somehow or another, and I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly. I somehow or another, by the end of the relationship, um, one of the kind of like deciding factors
Yeah.
was I was starting to get guidance from my doctor to go through weight loss surgery because
Oh.
all of my markers were showing that it was a big concern.
Uh-huh.
And he started to make fun of me for that.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was like once again, these like undermarked kind of comments. And
Right.
in retrospect, I realized it's because he struggled with his own weight.
Sure.
He was projecting. He didn't want to
Sure.
see me lose weight and then
What would that
yeah,
mean for
like
him? Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I ended up actually going through. So there's only two things in my life I regret: getting married to him, and the second one is getting weight loss surgery.
Yeah.
Because I look back and I don't know if I would have gotten it if it wasn't for him because of his own body dysmorphia
Right.
and like really horrible relationship with like food and his
Yeah.
self and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was I don't, and I've had complications.
Mhm.
I had kidney damage from the surgery. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know that I would have gotten it, if it wasn't for the
Mhm.
energetic that the relationship had me in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
So that was really hard. That was a really hard part of my life.
it sounds like it. And the word hard, even as you were describing it, the way that you described the reaction of your early culture, your family was sort of like, oh, isn't that sweet? Like, sort of quirky that you're into these things.
Hmm.
So it was almost like you didn't need to necessarily deny that part of yourself or like super fiercely own it. And then as you transitioned into describing the relationship with your ex, I felt that like pressurized, like forming a diamond kind of
Oh yeah.
a feeling, because it was like, because he was so mocking and like um dehumanizing about that part of it, it sounds like that almost was the response had to be like, no, this is me, this is mine, in a different way than could have happened without that, maybe.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
who knows.
Yeah, it's a, I haven't spent a lot of, because I spent a lot of time in therapy when I was
Hmm.
in that relationship. So I haven't spent a lot of time. And then, hurt people, right? He had his own set. For some odd reason, though, this is the lesson that I learned through that marriage was, and I've watched it, and some people have, it's been interesting to me. We talked about boundaries before we started, but it's
Hmm.
part of the reason I learned how to set hard boundaries
Yeah.
because what I can't, I'll never forget this. There's two specific points within therapy that I recall in that relationship. And the number one, I had a therapist finally telling my own personal one-on-one therapist,
Hmm.
finally at some point said something along these lines. How many times do you have to try to change before you're going to accept that it's not you that needs to change? Right? Yep. And the second one is we had been in couples therapy for probably about 9 months. I had an incredibly talented therapist that I'd found. And he was, I don't even remember, he was, I think, 50 years in his career.
Wow.
He'd been doing this a long time.
Hmm.
And we were about 9 months in. My partner got up. My husband at that time had gotten up and went to the restroom. And that therapist leaned over and basically said to me, um, once again, and not in so many words, I hope you understand that he is never going to change because he can't even recognize that he is part of the
Yeah. Right.
dysfunctional thinking. Yeah, I mean,
Whoa.
it was just like, wow. And so it was probably like 2 weeks after that, where I was like, I can't handle this anymore. We
Yeah.
agreed to a 90-day test because I wanted to separate.
Yeah.
My ex had said, no, we're in therapy. And so the therapist gets us to agree to 90 days. And the therapist goes, Sunshine, in essence, what do you need? What do you need to see from him
Yeah.
in order? And I said, he can't call me any names because he had a habit of name calling.
Uh-huh.
Can't call me any names for 90 days. If he can
Uh-huh.
do that, then I won't separate.
Uh-huh.
And then he goes and asks my ex-husband, oh, nothing. There's nothing. Or once again, he had nothing. He
Yeah.
wanted to say I was perfect. It was
Yeah.
only me that saw the problems in
Yeah.
the relationship. This was
Yeah.
all on me, all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so, okay, it was like something like 82 days. It was a week before our the 90 days was up. And he called me a name.
Yeah.
Yeah, we walked into therapy the following week. We sit down. The therapist proceeds to say, I've got some unfortunate news that I have to share with you. And the therapist says, I've decided that I'm ready to retire.
Wow.
And he said, don't worry, I'm not shutting it down all the way, but we'll have to see. And at some
Mhm.
point, if you guys need, in a few months, if you need continued help, then we might need. I said, nope,
This is
don't need anything.
we're also retiring.
Yep, there is the sign. I said, look at that
Wow.
serendipity right there.
Yeah.
I said he couldn't make it the
Yeah.
90 days, so we're separating. You
There
don't
we
have to
go.
worry about. Oh yeah, it was wild.
I
Wild.
Every time you tell another chunk of your story, I feel like, wow, you're getting a lot of guidance. Like, wow, you're getting
Mm.
a lot of support. Like, you don't hear about therapists telling someone, like, it's not you. This person's never going to change, especially a couples therapist. Like, that's such a big no no. I feel like you have just been so guided and given such support.
And I know this, and I know exactly what you're saying. They're not supposed to. That is not. But I think, and I've put myself in their shoes. What would you do if you literally
Oh,
watch someone showing up week after week,
yeah.
doing the hard work themselves?
Yeah.
How could you really continue to sit there and watch them just continue
Yeah.
over and over again without, yeah. So
Yeah.
I
Wow.
certainly know that it's not something that's normal that they should do, but yeah, I mean, I was, and that's why I said when that one therapist said, how much are you going to try to
Mm-hmm.
change? You
Mm-hmm.
know, that was a real eye opener. And so to me, every single time in my life now, thus far, this is why I say the boundaries piece. I have no problem if I'm trying to coach or lead someone. I believe that it is my responsibility to adapt to the individual that I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to coach and lead. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm in a relationship and I find that I am starting to try to change my behavior in order to step around and to
Mm-hmm.
like accommodate the other individual,
Mm-hmm. No thanks.
nope. No, it's a huge indication. If I'm starting to feel like I'm walking on, I literally, it's half of the reason right now I'm leaving this corporate job that I'm in. It's time for me to retire, but we've gotten to that particular place. And I said last summer, I said to my manager, I said I'm starting to feel like I'm dating my ex-husband again. And they
What?
said, why? I said, because we have continued to try to change the way that this business operates for the last 2.5 years, and nobody else wants to change along with it. So we keep trying. And the fact of the matter is, it has nothing to do with our lack of effort or energy,
Mm-hmm.
or our listening, or our behaviors, or our
Mm-hmm.
adopting, or our learning, or our growing. It's because everybody else that's being expected to go along this ride with us isn't doing their work.
Yeah. So being able to recognize that, to know, hey, I'm changing, I'm not acting according to my values in order to try to keep this going, that requires a real intimate knowledge and assurance around your own values.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how did that have to do with your sobriety, with your 12-step journey? Where and how have you developed the clarity around your values?
You know, that's a really interesting question. And the where, you're like really kind of, making me pause to think. I think a lot of times throughout life, and this isn't just me, where our values are established is by the experiences that we go through,
Mhm.
and I have, I don't have, none of my values are like wild or ridiculous. I mean, I go and I jokingly say I often go back to like kindergarten for a lot of my values.
Mhm.
I believe that sharing is caring. I operate just that's something that I value. When, someone is with me, if I have a sandwich and we're both hungry, we're splitting a sandwich, you
Mhm.
know. And it's a value that I've had, and I nor do I expect it in return. There are some people that hold that value and they expect,
Mhm.
I don't. Like, I expect, my only expectation is that those that want to give, feel comfortable doing so, you
Mhm.
know? And, I think another big value for me, came from it was just honesty is the best policy. And as somebody that can read minds and tell when you're actually not being honest, and there's nothing that hurts me more,
Yeah.
than, and, as far as like some of the other values and things of that nature, I think, I don't know if they're, I don't know that I'd recognize some of them as values as much as some of the strong boundaries,
Mhm.
of not allowing, people to try to pull me into, like the victim triangle. You familiar with the victim
Yeah,
triangle?
talk about it though, because I'd love the folks
Yeah.
joining us to hear about that.
So there's a lot of people that love and operate in what's referred to as the victim triangle. Sometimes it's also called as like a drama triangle. Um, and that is this triangle that there is a victim that kind of sits at a pivot point, and a victim requires someone to, be either persecuting them, which is like, chastising or putting them in that victim stance, or rescue them. And
Mhm.
often we'll play this dynamic with other individuals, but the reality is we can play it with ourselves too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can actually sit there and persecute. Anytime somebody gets caught in negative self-talk, you're persecuting yourself into a victim state.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, that to me is a big, and that's like, I don't know, that's a value, but that is a very hard boundary that I won't play with. I won't play in it. My partner's tried to take me into it every now and again, and he'll get angry, and I'm like, no, dude. I was like, I'm not. I was like, I don't know. You're like, you're stuck in this,
Yeah.
right? I was like, you need to go figure yourself out and then come back and we'll talk. But I'm like, you're not pulling me in. He gets so frustrated when I won't dance with him in that triangle, right? You know, he
Yeah.
wants me to persecute him or rescue him, and
Can't
I'm
we
like,
do this? Yeah.
yeah. But it's such a normalized, acceptable way for people to interact, right? It is so normalized, to the point of like, I'm literally, my brother's disabled. My brother's
Mm-hmm.
older than me. He's a disabled vet,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trying to publish a book. And I am literally battling right now this company because they're not delivering as expected, and they keep trying to persecute my brother in it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just like, this, we're not having this. I was like, this isn't happening. Right. I'm not going to play this, no, we're
Yeah.
going facts. We're going truth. Right. You state you have a refund policy, like, oh God. Yeah. It's just, it's wild to me. Uh, so I don't really know that I have like one way that I've discovered or uncovered what these values would be. But I do know, we started talking about being in the body. You asked me how I feel in my
Mm-hmm.
body. I will tell you, there is one thing that never, ever lies to
Yep.
us,
Yep.
right? And so you want to find out what your values are, listen to your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm so glad you said that because there is a sort of a failsafe in this nervous system technology, which you talked a little bit ago about. One of your biggest values is that honesty, that integrity. Your body, every single time, you may not recognize it, you may not remember how to hear it, but it will tell you. It'll do all sorts
Mm-hmm.
of number of things. And like your client with the chest stuff, it'll get louder and louder and louder, or it'll start shutting down, functions like digestion, etc. In order to let you know that something is not true. I always say, like, it's a GPS. Like, it's just there to, it's morally neutral, in opposition with the Cartman triangle or the victim triangle of
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a good guy and a bad guy and somebody who's in between them. um it doesn't have a good guy or a bad guy. It just says, like, yep, this is true for your soul, or nope, this is not true for your soul. And you can just know, you don't have to even like think of boundaries if you just are in relationship with your body, because your body will just tell you, like,
Oh
turn
yeah.
right here, or it'll say, like, reroute please.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I have someone, that I'm close to, and we got into a conversation recently, uh, about, there's someone in my spiritual path that I don't want any involvement with anymore. They don't, I get that the discomfort happens.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to explain this to this dear friend of mine, and they actually are a therapist, and she took a step back and she goes, "Do you think maybe you and them, this other individual, are like just triggering each other? Like
Mm.
maybe that's what's going on?" And I said, "Oh, fuck yeah." I said, "We
Hmm.
absolutely are." I said, "But that doesn't mean that it's healthy for me to continue to put myself into the path of that trigger over and over and
Yeah.
over again." I
Yeah.
said, that's what boundaries are for." Right.
Yeah.
I said, don't get me wrong. Maybe there's some other point in my life that I have capacity to be able to actually, step into it again. I said, but until that time comes, I said, I don't talk to my parents
Yeah. Yeah, why am I gonna
because
do
of
this
this.
with someone as an acquaintance?
Yeah. 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 So, no, our body is, unbelievably, brilliant at communicating with us.
Yeah.
We usually suck at hearing it though.
Yeah, yeah. There's this, if you like allegories, there's this beautiful book by someone named Martha Beck called Diana Herself. And there's a little character in it that's sort of like her daemon, or like her little, higher self or whatever. And um every time she lies or does something that's counter to her true soul's, she'll get what she calls the stabbies, and it feels like someone's actually stabbing her in her stomach. And it's like, yeah, it's just right there for you. And
Yeah.
it's amazing to be able to build that relationship with that communication. And it sounds like you mentioned earlier, the drinking did a really good job of quieting that communication and served some sort of purpose for you to be able to stay off of your true path, for the marriage, for the whatever. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, you know, my relationship with alcohol goes back to when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the hard part on it, when you start to like really truly step into recovery. And I was watching like some reel today popped up that said there's a
Mm,
difference between being sober and being in recovery. So let's be
yes.
real. I do not drink and I am in recovery, meaning I am actively doing the work to continue to understand why I got into that place in the first place.
Ugh.
Um yeah, and so phrase that question for me again one more time, Z, will you?
Yeah, so that alcohol was supporting you in
Yeah.
quieting down that voice that was giving you your
Yeah.
information from your body, and how, what purpose was that serving? How did you get to emerge from that?
So yeah, that's why I want it. So think about this as an 8-year-old, right? Growing up in a household where there is blatant emotional abuse, um, and with an alcoholic father, and you're a child. So I don't care what message my body was telling me. What am I actually able to do about it?
What are your options when you're 8, right?
Yeah. And so I did. I learned to drink. I learned that if I didn't want to pay attention to how my body, was speaking to me, and not only did I drink, right? So not only I'm a recovering alcoholic, I also have had an eating disorder my entire life because food is
Mm,
the other way. So
mhm.
folks that actually treat a lot of somatic trauma do get into addiction because addiction is a way that we actually will deal with trauma in our body.
Yes.
And so it's not just drugs, it's not just alcohol. We can do it through emotional eating is what they would
Mhm,
refer to it as. So
mhm,
we can do it through food. That's also one of the ways that I did it was,
mhm,
I ate as a child. I did a lot of hide eating.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, so the alcohol and these things dampen my ability. And so even wildly, it's like I get out of my parents' house, but there's still, let's be real, our connections to our parents
Yeah.
does not end when we step out of their home. That we still carry until we become aware of it. We still carry any generational curses that they're passing down from through us,
Mhm.
right? Until we're ready to like stop, pause, and recognize it. And so, I had learned this habit from 8 until 18, 10 years to hide any of these responses in my body that feel uncomfortable. That's the right way to do it. That's
Yeah.
the way that it should. That's what was shown to me
Yeah.
for my entire childhood. That's what my father did.
This is how you manage it. Mhm,
Yeah. Um, and my mother was the emotional eater. So,
mhm.
um, and so, yeah, the alcohol definitely hit a lot. Uh, it hit it, throughout my 20s. I mean, in your 20s, it's like really celebrated to drink.
Mhm.
It's not until like your 30s that people start questioning it. And they're really not questioning it. They're just wondering how do they do it with children?
Right. They're like, "How do we get this to work?"
Yeah, right. Um, and so yeah, it was a lot. And it wasn't until once again, goes back into, you know, when I went down the path of getting the weight loss surgery, they actually I don't the statistic is wild. There's like a 47% probability that you will end up as an alcoholic after surgery.
What?
Yeah, because once they go ahead and manipulate the digestive system, the manipulation means that your ability to be able to process alcohol has changed. And so the alcohol ends up hitting your intestinal tract faster than it would have. So it dilutes itself in the stomach. And so you become
Oh
drunk
my
faster. Yeah. And
word.
so, here's the ego in me is going like, I can control that, And so, yeah, it was after that surgery that things really started to um, go down a really bad path.
Oh my
Yeah.
word.
And they advised you to stay away from alcohol. But once again, I figured I was under control
Sure.
and it wasn't going to happen to me and all that kind of good stuff. And no, that wasn't the case. I think that I think at that point, you know, I was out of the marriage. And the first like year or so, I think I was just dealing with the grief of that marriage. And so
Yeah,
I was drinking.
of course.
And then you know, that would have brought us into 2017. And my father that I was speaking about, I was in a new relationship and it was very loving. The gentleman had his own addiction problems,
Mm.
you know, because lo and behold, uh, we tend to love to hang out with each
We
other.
like each other. We do.
Addicts love other addicts. It's just kind of wild. Um, yeah. And my father, we went on vacation with my parents, and about a month after we'd come back, my father was in the hospital. His
Oh,
entire body was shutting down. His liver and his liver and his kidneys were starting to fail. His heart was pumping at about 6%.
mm.
Um, and he was facing one of two decisions, one of two paths. Um, and the one path was he would go into hospice. So the only way they could continue to allow his heart to pump was this very aggressive medication that could
Mm.
only be administered through IV, through a hospice nurse, you know, through a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the ways. And they anticipated him, you know, being able to make it anywhere from another year to, you know, maybe less or maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
Or he could go down the path of having this very invasive pump implanted into his heart.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't want to proceed. My mom wanted him to, so he decided to.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he was there is because 10 years prior to this, his doctors had told him he had
Yeah.
congestive heart failure. You know, he like at the age of 55, his heart was already operating at something like 60%.
Uh-huh.
And he continued to drink and drink and drink. The doctors literally told him that he would have been better off smoking a pack a day than
Sure.
continuing to drink. Like that's the level of what he was doing to his body. And he just continued to not listen to it. And you know, even though, and so he went forward with the surgery, they required me to take a 2.5 month leave of absence in order to help because my mom's mental capacity was so strained. She couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And once again, like I said, he's been abusive, you
Yeah.
know, not a pleasant man. And yeah, and so you would have thought that maybe that would have caused me, and it did have me question my drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it was a year after that when my father got approved for a heart transplant. And my cousin, who is a year younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
was in the hospital dying of alcoholism. So
Oh,
here's my father, who I know for a fact has emotionally abused myself, my mother, and my brother, getting approved at the end of life. You know, he's 63 years old at this time to get a heart transplant.
mm-hmm.
And my nephew, who is a year younger than me in the hospital, his own body had deteriorated so far at this point that they couldn't approve him for a heart transplant.
Oh my
They wouldn't
heavens.
even approve him for this pump.
That your dad had. Yeah.
And yeah, so that really started to challenge my own relationship with alcohol. So now at this point, we're in 2018. So 2019 was where my cousin was doing so bad. He was on the verge of passing. And I decided to start 2019 off with trying to get 90 days not drinking. And, you know, it was interesting. It was so interesting. You know, and this goes back to, once again, I want to, you know, like making a very drastic change in your life, deciding that you no longer want to be one thing and turn into something else, letting
Mm-hmm.
one thing go,
Mm-hmm.
reinventing yourself, transforming. None of these things are easy, right? Like you have to go through like a some deep reflection, some deep shadow work. And so that 90 days was the start of me trying to understand why I was drinking. And so it's like interesting. I'd end up, you know, still going out and doing all the same social things that people are like, oh, why aren't you drinking? And I would respond back to them. You know, I said that I'm not drinking for 90 days. I said, but tell me this, why are you drinking?
Yeah.
why are you drinking? You
Mhm.
know, and like I couldn't get any good reason. Like
Yeah.
nobody gave me like nobody was like gave me like a valid reason of like, oh, well, actually this alcohol helps to process my food. And, you know, if I
Mhm.
don't drink it, then my digestive is hard. But, you know, like there was no like really good reason to continue, you know, the celebrations. I like the way it tastes. Like there was no reason. And as I was having this really hard time comprehending like logically, because even though I'm this weirdly spiritual person, I have
Mhm.
a very strong logical mind. And I'm like, why is this?
Mhm.
Why, like truly, nobody could give me a good reason. And you know, I guess I didn't need a good reason because around day 83, um, I say my drinking demon got the best of me. I was in such a dark funk, such a horrible, deep place of depression at this 83 days in that I said to my partner at that time, I said, I finally understand why people take their own life.
Yeah.
I said, because if I had to wake up feeling like this every single day, I'm like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
And so I drank that night. And again, every night for about probably 6 more months
Mhm.
until I showed up at work on a Monday after a 10-day vacation, 10 days of binging
Mhm.
in withdrawals.
Yeah.
Yeah, body shaking, sweats, clammy, you know, everything, glassy eyed. Um, and I walked into my therapist's office that night and I just started bawling and telling her I'm an
Mhm.
alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. You know, I'm an alcoholic. I just can't drink. And yeah, it was rough. You know, it was not fun. And you know, it's like, and I think about this all the time because as I go back to I'm sober, I'm not drinking, and I'm in recovery. And those are two
Mhm.
different things. And I keep thinking though about all of these things that we might need to recover from.
That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, it's a perfect template for you can be out of an abusive relationship and not be in recovery from it. You can be out of organized religion and not be in recovery from it. You can be out of the culture that demands that you look, act, you know, speak a certain way and not be in recovery from it. It's that piece that gift that you were given as a early, you know, as a young child, that curiosity allowed you to question the people around you, to question the alcohol, to question yourself. That self inquiry is the part that we are not taught because
Mm-mm.
what happens when we have self inquiry is we become personally empowered.
Oh yeah, we're
And
sovereign at that point.
yeah, there's no system that wants to encourage being a source to self.
Oh yeah, and not only that, but we are responsible and accountable. We now take responsibility, and it's
Yes.
this interesting thing that I told you before. I've been called bossy,
Yeah.
controlling, and all this kind of stuff. And I, in my 20s, I'm such a weirdo. I really am. In my 20s, it really bothered me. I was like, why does this keep happening? And at some point, after like asking my friends, I'm like, do you think I'm controlling? Would you mind writing me a letter and answering that question? So funny.
Yeah, I need to
I'm
read it
like,
and have evidence of it.
yeah, I know. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, okay. Um, I finally realized that I'm not controlling. I just accept responsibility when nobody else does, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I just accept responsibility when nobody else does. Yeah, and so I go back, it was July at that particular time. I did admit that I was an alcoholic. The unfortunate truth at that point is I just decided to admit that I was an alcoholic and
Mhm.
not drink. I did not yet step into recovery. It was
Mhm.
not until
Mhm.
I relapsed over 60 days later
Oh,
on my
wow.
40th birthday, right, in Costa Rica with my partner and did some things that are so horrifyingly like such a out of character for me. You know, I was gross, I was nasty, I was a horrible, horrible person. Um, and yeah, it wasn't until that point that I realized I needed help, that I couldn't do it on my own,
Uh-huh.
that I didn't have all the answers, that I wasn't the one in control, that somebody else had to take the wheel. That
Mm.
me trying to make all the decisions in life, thinking like I knew everything, was just not going to cut it anymore. Yeah, we came back after, I think we were there for 10 days. So my anniversary is when I stepped into recovery, is October 9th of 2019. Yeah.
And how did you know where to start to get that help?
I'm very grateful, thankful, and blessed that my partner at that time gave me an ultimatum. Yeah, he said if you want to continue you want to continue to try to work on this relation, because I did some horrible things to him.
Hmm.
If he's like, then you've got to go get help for yourself, and you got to do 90 meetings in 90 days.
Okay, so 12-step groups was where
Yep,
you started. Hmm.
yep, yep. And once again, here's this little girl, same one, walking into different, weird, strange, walking into an AA meeting, um, and like slightly concerned. I remember I asked a friend, I knew a friend that was in 12 step that I hadn't talked to since I was in high school, mind you. I reached out to them. They took me to a local. I cried the whole time, couldn't even talk my first meeting.
Yeah,
I cried for pretty much probably maybe the first 45 days at every meeting,
I
right?
think that's pretty typical.
It was, and just, I mean, I can't tell you nowadays, I tell people like, I hate it, like drives me bonkers when people like, I'm so sorry when they're crying. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, thank you. Thank you for crying. I appreciate this. You're moving
Yes.
something. There's something that
Hmm.
needs to move in you.
Hmm.
Please do not, never apologize for crying. Right. Um, yeah. And so it started out with these 12 steps, but then, you know, after about 90 days, and I was sitting at the table still there, and I was just like, I need something else. Like,
Hmm.
this is great. I said, but this ain't cutting it.
Hmm.
This isn't going to keep me, this isn't going to take me through recovery. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you've ever been around a 12-step program, but they have the concept of a sponsor.
Yes, yes. I was in very active in Al-Anon for about 5 years. Not so active now, but I still really appreciate parts of it. So yes, a sponsor.
Yeah. Uh, I had 4 of them tell me no.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, here's the universe once again being like, cool, cool, cool. You found your way here, but this might not be where you need to stay.
Yes, 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 yes.
So finally, though, I think it was that it's not even after I asked the 4th one, they had someone they were sponsoring that they told to go sponsor me. So cool. I
Okay.
got a sponsor.
Okay.
We got about 2 months in. So it turned out that was January. In March, the woman that's my sponsor proceeds to let me know that she's stepping out of AA because she is uncertain about what her own spiritual beliefs are at this point. So meaning the conversations that I was having with her were too intense and too depth.
Yeah, totally.
They were very deep.
You pushed
And
her
I
past
chant
her edge. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I was like, oh wow. So needless to say, I continued to join into meetings, I think probably for almost a whole year, right? The pandemic happened shortly thereafter that. But a lot of my own work through recovery has been on my own. It's
Hmm.
been listening to the moment I stopped drinking, my connection to spirit,
Yeah.
yeah.
Came right back online.
Oh yeah.
Right there for
Yeah.
you.
And like, yeah, and so at that point, I've literally just been navigating this by leaning in and listening, by using my cards, by
Hmm.
reading, by allowing my intuition and my gifts to guide me where I need to go next. And I mean, I've still had my own challenges. I'm 4.5 years out, and I'm very conscious because I belong to a number of recovery Facebook groups. People will still relapse
Oh,
four,
sure.
5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 15 years out, you
Sure.
know. So I've often had I have a couple of folks that say, "Oh, I'm never going to refer to myself as an alcoholic. I don't drink anymore." And I'm like, "No, I'm a fucking alcoholic.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I am never going to deny that title. I just am like, you know, I know for a fact that if you were to go ahead and slide a drink in front of me and I consume that drink, it would not take much for that little drinking demon of mine to convince me to go do it again and
Yes.
again. And yeah, and so no, I absolutely am. But I'm in recovery. I'm very grateful for it. I have other things that I still want to, you know, I'm still recovering from. It's not just, you know, all of that. And it's funny, you know, especially since if you were been around Al-Anon and you've worked some of the steps, you know, the one of the more challenging things was as I got into step 4 and writing my inventory,
Yeah.
you know, with my sponsor, and she kept trying to push me to find more things I'd done to people.
Right.
And I was like, wow. You know, and she had like there were some real nasty things she relayed she had done, you know, and I'm like,
Mhm.
but that's not me. Most
Yeah.
of the betrayal has been to me.
Yeah. 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 It's yeah, that there's we could have a whole conversation about 12
Oh, I
steps, and like you said, I think that they serve a purpose. There's a lot, you know, it sounds like it was a really helpful bridge for you towards this, as you I think mentioned somewhere, witchy recovery, which I really like that
Mhm.
phrase. Um and it certainly was a bridge for me and needed that real structure at the very beginning. And I'm so grateful for it. But then, you know, there comes that time, it sounds like for both of us, that was like, okay, now it's a new version of my rules, my, you know, my program, my rules. And sounds like you and I are both built to be like, nope, nope, you're not gonna tell me that I'm not in charge, because I'm always in charge. So what does the day
Yep.
to day look like of your recovery now? Like, how are you maintaining and cultivating and growing that connection with yourself as you move through life now?
Well, you know, I think one of them is part of going through the 12 steps allowed me to see them differently, and I have started to rewrite them. I've
Mm.
started to recreate. And so like one of those things is that I still 12 step. I am still out here trying to talk to people, but it's not a matter of just like it's not the addiction. It's kind of what we're talking about. It's the recovering from these things in life that we no longer want to carry with us.
Yeah,
Right. So I do that. That is, you know, I'm mentoring, I'm coaching, I'm, you know, everything that I can. I'm of service in the world. And that to me is a big, big, big part of my
it's
recovery.
beautiful.
That's a huge part of my recovery is being of service of the world. Like I truly believe part of my life's purpose is to wake up all of these individuals that are walking this earth that know they have a lifeline, like a long bloodline of being a witch, of embracing these beautiful gifts that we
Mm-hmm.
have, and they themselves want to be of service of the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, you know, that's one of the biggest ways that I continue. And it's just that daily reflection. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I stop, I pause, I try not to, you know, overreact. I'm conscious. I'll tell you, last week I got sent home from my corporate job. I've got another like just over 30 days with them. We get sent home at 1 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. And there's that curiosity, like, this is weird.
Mm.
What's this all about? Within an hour, my basement is flooding.
Wow.
My basement is flooded. And we're not talking about like a trickle. We're talking about by the time I managed, and so I call my plumber. He's literally like, we just finished up our last job. I'm 10 minutes away, right? Like all of
Oh.
this stuff. He comes in, he's like, holy shit, this is bad. We got to get this fixed. Like the only damage that really happened outside of needing to clean things is I had to throw away old like air filters for the furnace because they got wet, right? And I'm
You were
literally sitting
so
there
taken care of.
6 years ago, if I was still drinking, I would have been a hot mess. I would have been panicked, frantic, chaotic, stressed out. And I'm like, just my friend comes over because I told her, you know, I have a friend that helps me clean my house. And
Mhm.
she's like, I'll come over and I'll see what I can help get started. And she comes over and she's more stressed out than I am.
Wow.
Right. And I'm just like, it's not so to me, recovery is like, and it's this reflection. It's this like, oh
Yeah.
wow, it's truly waking up every single day to choosing to live differently than I once did, choosing to live
Mhm.
in alignment like I now am,
Mhm.
listening to my body, knowing that my mind is only there as a processing unit, right? It is actually not meant to help me, do anything else besides process information,
I love that.
you know? So
Ugh.
yeah, that's a lot of what it is just every single day waking up, being grateful, being thankful, recognizing my blessings and continuing to be of service out there in the world. Yeah.
So gorgeous. So, as we finish up, share with us what are the ways that you're of service? What are the ways that people can connect with you and receive from this um, beautiful offering that you are showing up for?
Yeah, my favorite way is just to tell folks to email me to start sunshine@sunshinereadings.com. I
Okay,
sit behind that email address and I love, but you can find me on the website, sunshinereadings.com.
beautiful.
You can also go to illuminateunschool.com, which is just
Ooh,
starting to fire up. So this is all of the education, the knowledge, the community, all of that kind of great stuff that as I step out of corporate, I'm incredibly excited to get
that
more and more
sounds
active,
cool.
and continue to build that because, as I said, my calling is to be of service and it's to be of these service to the folks that want to embrace the witch side of themselves and that knowledge, that experience in that community. And by golly, as I said, human design, I'm a community builder. And so I
Mm.
love this. I love it so much. So that's how I tell people to start out finding me. And either one of those names, Sunshine Readings or Illuminate the Unschool of Witchcraft, are both able to be searched as well. So
Amazing. Okay, I'll include all that in the description. And this was just such a joy. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being with us today.
I'm so delighted you had me.
Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording.